Biz Talks is a TED Talk type event that focuses on business integrity and zeal. Today we have three guests who are speaking with us. We have Toby Compton, we have Marty Kittrell, and Tinnin. Our first speaker today will be Toby Compton. Toby is the executive director of the Metro Sports Authority. Prior to his work there, Toby served as an advisor for the Haslam administration for economic and workforce development, and as a senior advisor to Nashville Mayor Carl Dean. Toby has 20 years of public affairs experience and has managed political and public relations campaigns at the local, state, and federal levels. Toby has serves currently as an adjunct professor here at Lipscomb since 2011 and frequently speaks on topics of lobbying and advocacy. He has a bachelor's degree from Lipscomb and a master's degree from Cumberland University. Toby's a good friend of mine, and we want to welcome him. Toby has to leave a little early, so we're going to go ahead and present him with an applause and a gift now.
Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it. Thank you, buddy. Nathan's a great guy. Does everybody, if anyone doesn't know him, y'all need to get to know him because he's going somewhere in this state. I've been in the trenches with him several times, working in the Haslam administration. He was in the governor's office. I was working for Commissioner Haggerty, recruiting businesses like we did yesterday. Did everybody see the news yesterday of all the jobs downtown? As students, you should be super excited that new jobs are coming into town, new development, new livelihoods and prosperity in downtown Nashville. So those are the kind of work I got to do. So I started out, I was here at Lipscomb in the 90s. And let me tell you, today, the university experience that you have, the degree that you're getting, that your experience is better, your degree is worth more than when I was here. And I hope that in 20 years, when you guys come back and hopefully speak at a Biz Talk or something else, I hope that you're able to say the same thing, because if we all collectively work together, you're going to get a richer and richer and richer experience out of Lipscomb. And one of the things that I've been most excited about, and this is maybe something I probably did because I don't know how many of you, I was like on the 5 or 6 year plan here at Lipscomb when I was in school. So the reason I did that was because I tended to do stuff off campus. And I know that Dr. Lowry's vision is that all of Nashville becomes Lipscomb's campus. And I've heard him talk about that, and I've shared that passion with him. And I think that many of you have these interesting experiences. So maybe you're here for pizza, maybe you're here for chapel credit. Did anybody think that I was going to talk about the Titans or the Predators today? I'm not. The truth of the matter is, and that, even though I'm on tape, I probably shouldn't say this up there, but I'm not a sports fan. It's amazing. I have the best job in all of Metro government, and I have every guy's dream job as being the head of the sports authority, working with our professional sports teams and getting to deal with contracts. And this morning I spent 30 minutes on the phone with George Plaster. I couldn't tell you anything that was in the sports page today. I don't know who won the Predators game last night. I've been to one Titans game this year. It's just not interesting to me, frankly. I don't watch SportsCenter. But here's what I can do. I can read people, I can read a spreadsheet, and I can deal with different folks. And that's what makes me pretty good at my job, and that's why a governor and a mayor and folks want to hire me to come and run jobs. And that's stuff I learned here at Lipscomb. The other thing that I learned here at Lipscomb was the value of integrity. And you're each getting that, through your chapel, through your Bible credits and different things like that. But the ability to go and work with someone one-on-one and fundamentally understand that you have to be honest, you have to be upfront. So when I worked for, I'm a Republican, right? So I was running around out there doing some stuff, and this Democrat guy named Carl Dean called me up and said, "Hey, I want you to work in my campaign." I said, "Well, that's kind of weird. Well, let's go have a cup of coffee." And I got to know the mayor in ways that were just so fantastic. And I say this because this is where I kind of want to go. It's kind of about working together and people coming together because, if you look at the situation in Washington, sometimes we get too partisan. We get too off on the sides of things. Sometimes up there they lose integrity. But in Nashville, whether you're working with a pro sports team or a mayor, sometimes if you get to know someone who's different than you, who maybe believes sometimes a little differently than you do, sometimes some really special things can happen when that door opens, and sometimes you have the faith to walk through it. Interesting things happen. So as a Republican, I started working for a Democrat and Mayor Dean, and sometimes I would have people say, "Oh, how could you do that? Or you'd have Democrats that went to the mayor and would say, Mayor Dean, how could you hire this guy to do your lobbying or do your policy work? And the funny thing was, when that would happen, I would always sit down with Carl. We would be in his office, and we would sit, and we would laugh about those things. We couldn't believe people actually thought that was an issue. And so I'd encourage you guys, as you're studying, as you're getting out there, as you're out in the community, do things that are against your type. Do things that maybe you're not comfortable with. Go and explore and get to know this community. The prosperity in this community right now today is unlike ever before. I grew up here. I lived in East Nashville as a little kid at a time when someone would ask me, say, well, where are you from? I would never say East Nashville. I would say, well, I'm from Madison or somewhere like that. LP Field wasn't there. It wasn't a cool place. And so my parents never went to college. I was the first person in my whole family to go to college. I didn't know where in the world I was going to college. And I chose Lipscomb, and I chose it because it was very comfortable for me. But when I got here, I had to kind of force myself out of that comfort zone. And I started running around with guys like Randy Bostic, who just popped in back there. He's late to chapel, just like we were back in the day. Or Derek Free, that's standing back here, who's my neighbor and friend I get to deal with. But some of these guys and we all would go out, and we would try our best to explore the boundaries beyond Granny White Pike and Belmont Boulevard. And after that, I had opportunities to work in political campaigns, which was kind of interesting and fun, all over the place. I mainly stayed in the Nashville area. Then later on, I figured out, well, you can't really make money running around being a volunteer all the time, so I had to kind of specialize in something. So I became a communications guy. And so I moved into the PR firm world and doing advocacy work, kind of more professionally, lobbying. It's not really a dirty word. And then I got these opportunities to work for these great guys. And so I commented a little bit on Mayor Dean. I'll tell you a little bit about Governor Haslam. I think that we couldn't in this state have elected a person of better integrity and a person of more zeal, someone with a business acumen who's running this state in a way that that very few others could. And I think it's really neat. I've seen him here on campus several times, kind of incognito, and I think that's kind of cool. And so Governor Haslam has a very interesting way of dealing with people one-on-one too. It's very much, when you're sitting across and you're making a deal, it's very much a business relationship where you get to know folks, you work together for the common good, and you rise above anything partisan. Or there's more things that bring us together than divide us apart, he would tell you. And those are the kind of leaders I think that we need, not only in this city, in this state, but also in this country. And I hope that I get to continue, and people like Nathan get to continue working, and we get to kind of bring people together and do something good. Hope that was successful. I kind of gave a little bio, a little zeal, I hope. I love this city. So back to the Sports Authority, I'll kind of close with this. So despite not really being a huge sports fan, sports nut, I do watch things. I'm not oblivious. But the reason I do what I do every day is because I want to help people. And the concept of sports and building the new ballpark at Sulphur Dell is going to be fantastic. First Tennessee Park is going to be first class. I was out there this morning. That's kind of why I'm dressed, because it was cold, it was damp. It'll be a fantastic thing, but I am less concerned about what happens on that playing field, and I'm more concerned about what happens in the stands and bringing people together and the congregation of different folks kind of coming back together as we kind of revitalize Jefferson Street in an area of town that, frankly, in the north part of the Nashville area, we haven't had economic development the way we should. And I'm more excited about that than anything that happens on the field. I'm more excited that last night there were people up and down Broadway that came together for a Predators game. We're not a traditional ice hockey market. I'm more excited about that. And I'm more excited that next week, that before the Titans take the field, which I think is great, it's Monday Night Football, right? It's going to be a fun game. But I'm really excited that in the commercial breaks, the skyline of our city is going to be featured. I'm excited those announcers before the game are going to be talking about what a cool city we live in and all the news we have. So with 1 minute and a half left, I'll tell you, this spring I'm teaching a class in political communications. So I know y'all are all registering right now. It's on Tuesday afternoons. We'll talk a lot more about all of these issues, talk more. Heck, I might even get you into a baseball game this spring as we kick off things. So I encourage you to register for my class in political communications and political science department. And I just appreciate being here and seeing so many friendly faces and getting to share with you guys just for a few minutes. Thanks.
Our next speaker is somebody that I think we're fairly familiar with. I know we were talking earlier. He said, how do you squeeze 40 years into 10 minutes? That's the way I feel when I look at his bio here. How am I going to squeeze all that in? But I'd like to start off by just saying that Marty's had extensive career experiences in a variety of different industries with a focus on corporate strategy, mergers and acquisitions, corporate finance, and security offerings, private equity, organizational development, and board practices. That experience culminated in the strategic sale of 5 companies and the initial public offerings of 2 companies over the past 30 years. I think this man knows a little bit about business. I'd also like to say that he is currently serving on our board of trustees here at Lipscomb, and he is currently chairman of the Finance and Real Estate Committee and is a member of the Executive Committee. If you guys would please help me welcome Mr. Marty Kittrell.
Thank you, Chuck, and thank you, Leanne, for extending the invitation. Always glad to come talk at Lipscomb. I spent 3 meaningful years at Lipscomb from 1974 to 1977. And every chance I get to come back, I try to come back, and I really like the interaction with students. Charles Frazier sitting on the front row. Those of you who know Charles know that he's a longtime member of the faculty here at Lipscomb. In a 2-year period of time, I had Charles for 8 classes. And being a modest guy and showing a lot of integrity, I will tell you that I had 8 A's. So I really always like seeing Charles. And Charles, thank you for the meaningful impact you had on my life. You know, Leanne and Chuck said you're going to talk about the intersection of business, integrity, and zeal. And I said, great, you know, I can probably boil that down to about 4 or 5 hours. And we'll do like an hour to 2 hours over a 3 or 4 day session. And they said, no, you have 10 minutes. And now I've got 8 minutes and 50 seconds. So we're going to really run through a few things. And I'm going to use a couple of props along the way. I'm going to focus on one particular aspect of integrity and zeal, and that's the intersection of where those two things meet. You know, whenever you are successful in business, in your life, in academics, you know, whatever you're doing, when you're going to be successful, you have to make sure you're balancing your zeal with your integrity. Where I personally have found myself in trouble over the years, I've never had a problem with zeal. I've always tried to bring my A game. I always tried to make sure I got enough sleep. I always tried to make sure I was present in the moment, that I was engaged, that I was an active listener. All those things you'll hear about when you take, you know, Leanne's communication courses or whatever courses they'll hear that stuff like that in. That's not the issue. That's never been the issue for me. What's been the issue for me is making sure I balance integrity along with that. When you look at history, sports, politics, and I'm going to use 2 or 3 examples in each of those 3 areas, where the world has gotten into trouble over the last couple of thousand years is when the integrity did not match up with the zeal. Let me give you some examples. In politics, Richard Nixon, 1972, re-election at all costs, right? What did that result in? Watergate, that's right. Let's talk about a more recent example, Lois Lerner. Everybody know who Lois Lerner is? Come on, raise your hand. IRS, partisan zeal, got her to focus on conservative groups, probably partisan zeal facilitated by emails from prominent members of Congress or the White House. That results in a lack of integrity that causes emails to disappear. it may have resulted in her taking the fifth before Congress. Obamacare, whether you're for or against it, when it was sold, what was the one thing we heard over and over and over and over? If you like your policy, you can keep it. Millions of people found out that was a lie. So, those are just three quick examples from the political arena. Let's talk about sports real quick. Let me give you 3 or 4 examples in the sporting world. Lance Armstrong won how many Tour de France's? 6, 7, I don't know, big number. How many of those were because he doped? Michael Vick, very promising football career. Dogfighting? Really? Forfeits a $100 million professional football contract because of dogfighting? Does felony time because of dogfighting? Where's the integrity there? Baseball. Plenty of examples in baseball. How many home run records are tainted because of the steroid scandal? Pete Rose should be in the Hall of Fame. He's not because of gambling. All of those people had zeal. They had zeal out the wazoo. They were short in the integrity department. Tiger Woods, most recent example. A few years ago, one would have said he was a sure thing to beat Jack Nicklaus's record of 18 majors. Now he's even money at best to match that record. Probably 2 or 3 years of the prime of his career impacted by his personal issues, a lack of integrity. Doesn't mean he's not a good golfer. Doesn't mean Michael Vick's not a good football player. Doesn't mean that some of those baseball players weren't great baseball players. But a lack of integrity more than offset the fact that all of those folks showed a lot of zeal. Let's talk about history. The Roman Empire. Everybody know what a denarius is? Who's been in Bible class and studied a denarius? Knows what denarius is? Come on. Raise your hands. Raise your hands. Come on. Denarius was a form of currency, Roman currency, right around the time of Christ. I'm going to hand that to Charles. Y'all can look at that. Let Charles show that to you after the talk. That's a real Roman denarius from 27 BC. The official beginning of the Roman Empire. Rome had 500 years of being a republic. That goes away, becomes an empire in 27 BC, peaks in power and geography that it controls only about 100 years later, and then begins a 1,000-year period of decline. Most powerful empire in the world's history. Around 120 AD, Roman Empire controlled 20% of the world's population. And then infighting, assassinations, disputes, civil wars gradually led to a period of long decline. A lack of integrity. The communist pledges under Stalin. Stalin came to power in the 20s. He was the supreme ruler of Russia until 52 or 53. In the late 30s, in a one-year period of time, 37, 38, 1 million people were purged, killed, assassinated in Russia during the purges. Can't say the communists weren't zealots. Oh, they were zealots, all right. They demonstrated lots of zeal. Zeal in terms of killing their fellow Russian citizen. An unbelievable lack of integrity. There are business examples, whether it's business example from 15 years ago, Enron, or 7 or 8 years ago, the financial crisis. You know, those are situations where the company may have demonstrated one thing in terms of zeal, but something completely different in terms of integrity. It's tough to maintain your integrity. Let me close with a personal example. How many of you know who Terry Bradshaw is? Come on, raise your hands. Famous quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Who's a Pittsburgh Steelers fan? Anybody? Right here on the front row. Right over there. I'm going to throw you a football. See if you can catch it. This is an authentic autograph Terry Bradshaw football. With no error. Why is that football in my home office at home? I no longer have an outside office because I'm retired. So I have a home office where all of the detritus of my career tends to accumulate. That's a great word. If you've never used the word detritus, look it up. It's a great word. It's the rubble of one's career. And 15 years ago, I was at a Bank of America leveraged debt conference where Terry Bradshaw was the after-dinner speaker. Probably 400 people in the ballroom. At the end of his after-dinner speech, where he gave a rambling discourse on a failed marriage, you know, Terry's been married 4 times. I think he's on his 4th wife. This was after wife number 2 or 3, I guess. Gave a horrible after-dinner speech. But, you know, the guy's a football player. He's not necessarily a good after-dinner speaker. The host, the Bank of America host, says, okay, Terry has agreed to throw out 12 footballs to the audience. If you look underneath your plate, like once again, there's like 400 people in the room. It's much bigger than this ball. It was a ballroom much bigger than this, although it's about the same number of people probably. If you look under your plate, you'll see randomly scattered around the room plates that have a star on them. If your plate has a star on it, Terry Bradshaw will throw you a football, and you'll have a chance to come up afterwards and have Terry Bradshaw, have your picture made with Terry Bradshaw. Everybody quickly turned over their plate. I looked at my plate, quickly raised my hand in a moment of zeal and said, here, throw me the football back. And I caught a football from Terry Bradshaw, which I continue to brag about to this day. What was wrong with that story?
Is there a star on your plate?
There was no star on the bottom of my plate. And in a moment of weakness, and in a moment of stunning lack of integrity, I raised my hand and caught a football from Terry Bradshaw. Never compromise your integrity for your zeal. Thanks.
Our next speaker comes to us from Southwestern Consulting. Her name is Tinnin. A little interesting background information on her. She was a Girl Scout, and she sold a lot of Girl Scout cookies when she was 7 years old. And she made so much at age 11, she earned a patch for that. I'm sure that's a major accomplishment there. For the last 15 years, I've got you down as Dawn on this, has continued to perfect her sales technique as a top producing salesperson and a branch manager for a Fortune 100 company, and is a coach and a trainer for thousands of top producing salespeople across the United States. Let's give Miss Dew a nice warm welcome.
Thanks, Chuck. I appreciate that. You know, it's a little bit funny that he said, You know, I was a Girl Scout at age 7, and that is because when I was 7 years old, I knew what I wanted to be in life. I wanted to be a salesperson. It didn't matter if I was selling cookies or fudge, wrapping paper, or anything. If there was a door to knock on, I was going to knock on it, and I was going to ask for your business. And as I grew up to be a teenager and as I went into college, I started to learn that being in sales was an honorable profession, and that people would look down on you. They would compare you to car salesmen, or they would compare you to other people in the world. And one of the things that I really learned as I got out of college and found myself in a sales role is that sales is an incredibly honorable profession. In fact, it's the only industry and the only profession on earth that does not judge on race, sex, or age. You are allowed to make the same amount of money as any of your competitors as you're wanting to grow in your own profession. Now, when Chuck called me today and asked me to speak, I was very honored to speak to a group of college students because there are so many things that I wish I had heard about business when I was in college. And so I want to share a couple of those things with you today. And the first thing is the honor of upholding the integrity of business as usual. Now, have you all heard the term business as usual in some way or another, right? Business as usual is typically made in the fact of, hey, you know, this is just business as usual. You know, you lose a job, you get a new job, you get a day off, or there's a snow day, or something like that. There are a lot more snow days where I grew up in Minnesota. You don't have as many here. Any Minnesotans? No Minnesotans in here? Oh, darn. But you get days off, and it's because of business as usual. But as I became older and older, I realized that business as usual has different terms in different areas and in different fashions. And there are 3 things that I have learned in a way to honor business as usual. And the first one is the importance of an ideal week. Now, right now, you are living an ideal week every single day, and I speak to my coaching clients on average 20 to 25 hours every single week about how to have an ideal week. Now, when you're in college, you have an ideal week because you know what time to get up, what time to go to class, what college courses you're going to be taking, and you know when you're supposed to be doing your homework. That is an ideal week. Now, what happens when we get into business is we start to flounder. We start to wing it. We think that we just know what we're supposed to be doing, and if we don't live on a schedule, we lose track of ourselves. There is a very big thing that is important about having an ideal week, and there's one thing that I've learned about that, and that is if you never create one, you will never have one. So when you get into the business world, create an ideal week. Create what you want to do. How much do you want to work on yourself? How much dating do you want to be doing, or how much family time do you want to be spending? How much time do you want to be spending on the ball field or anything else? It is important to create an ideal week for yourself. The second tip that I learned in business when following business as usual is the importance of planning. Now, we are all taught that we need to plan out things and we need to plan out our life. I am a planner to the nth degree. I plan out what day I do my laundry now. I plan out when I am going to run. I plan out when I am going to be having date night with my husband. And one of the things that I have found is that Dave Ramsey actually once said, if you want to find out what's important to somebody, look at their checkbook and look at their calendar. Look at their checkbook and look at their calendar if you want to find out what's important to you. And there was one thing that I learned, and that was I never wanted to have a second failed marriage. And so I plan out my marriage with my husband very, very much. We know when we're going to have date night. He knows that every single morning my number one job is to wake up and tell him how much I love him and how much I adore him. And I plan that out because of the things that I didn't learn in college. See, my first marriage, I was planning a wedding. I was not planning my marriage. And it ended up having a horrible, horrible failure less than 2 years later. And at 25 years old, I had to admit I was a divorced female. I had a big D stamp on my shoulder and I got judged. Today I wear that D stamp with honor because I plan. And that's what's so important when you get into business, is if there's things that you want to do and things that you want to accomplish, then you need to plan for it. How long is it going to take? What do you have to do to build that into your life? And how can you really make sure that that happens? The third tip that I want to share with you and how to accomplish business as usual is the importance of keeping it together. The importance of keeping it together. Now, nobody likes working with somebody who is out of control or irrational or anything like that. In fact, they look at you and say they have a lot of drama in their life. It's not going to get you very far in life, and you're all looking around going, yeah, I know somebody like that. Because it's true. It's true. We really need to keep it together. Now, I shared with you that at 25, I went through a pretty ugly divorce. And one day I was sitting at my desk and I was crying. He and I had just had another argument, and I wasn't keeping it together. My boss pulled me aside and she said, "Do I want to talk to you?" We went into the conference room, and of course I let her have it of all of the ugly things that were happening in my life at that time. And she said, "You can't be that girl." And I said, "What do you mean, Pat? What do you mean I can't be that girl?" And she said, "You are in the middle of a really ugly divorce, and unfortunately I've been through two myself. But one of the things that I've learned is that you are in the process of letting him ruin your life. Are you going to let him ruin your career as well?" Now, I didn't know what that meant at the time, but she said, "Do, there's no crying in baseball." Now, we've all heard that before, right? There's no crying in baseball. And she said, "Do, if you can't keep it together, then I need you to go home. I need you to take a drive. I need you to go walk down around the block." And she told me I needed to be a duck. Have any of you ever heard "be a duck" before? Be a duck. So think about the way that a duck looks on the water. How do they look on the water? Nice, smooth, but what are they doing under the water? They're paddling like crazy. They're absolutely busting it under the water. But on top, they are keeping it together. And that is what's so important about keeping it together in business, is that it's not cool to look like you're losing control. In fact, when I started dating my husband 14 years ago, he was not a duck. In fact, he was the kind of guy that as he would sit at his desk, he would, pull on his hair because he was so stressed out with everything that he had to do on his plate. And so somebody once came into Shane's office and they said, "Shane, are you okay?" And he said, "Yeah, I'm fine." And they said, "You don't look like it." So Shane started studying on what he needed to do to get it together. And he learned how to be a duck. And so sometimes when you think you have a lot of stress on your shoulders and you have a lot to do, it's not cool to look like you don't have it together. We all have the same amount of time in our life. We're given 24 hours a day to do anything that we want with it. And so as you're trying to prioritize and as you're trying to put your life together and figure out what is business as usual and what can I do with my time, I want you to ask yourself this question: is it a priority versus is it not important? So when you say "I don't have time to" or "I'm too busy to," I want you to ask yourself that question. Is it important? Because if it's important, you'll find a way. And if not, you'll find an excuse. So don't let the excuses affect you in your business. Think about what you want to accomplish. Think about the importance of having an ideal week. Think about the importance of planning, and think about the importance of keeping it together. Because as you are planning your life and as you are planning your future, it is so unbelievably important to be a duck. Thank you.